Okay, moving on from dot plots, chapter 4, day 1, part 2. Let's see, what's next? Okay, be careful when you are having quantitative data that you make a histogram, or if you're making a histogram that you have quantitative data. Don't make a bar graph for quantitative data, and don't make a histogram for categorical data. All right. When we describe a distribution, and you're going to look at a graph, a histogram, and you're going to be asked to describe that distribution, you're going to have to talk about 3 things: shape, center, and spread. What are those 3 things? Shape, center, and spread. What are they? Shape, center, and spread. What? Shape, center, and spread. 3 things: shape, center, and spread. Or, if you're looking left to right, shape, center, and spread. Don't forget them. You need to talk about them. Okay, so here we are. Shape, starting off with shape. There are 3 things that we consider. 3 things we consider when we talk about shape. 1 is the number of humps or bumps you have. Don't start singing Black Eyed Peas songs here. I don't want to hear it. How many humps or bumps do you have in your histogram? Then we can talk about, is it symmetric or not, and unusual figures. When we talk about humps and bumps, we're talking about, really, is it called unimodal or bimodal or multimodal? And what I mean by that is this: if you have 1 hump in your graph, it's unimodal. If, however, it's unimodal, we don't say unimodal, we'll describe it differently. If you have more than 1 hump, like that, it is bimodal. If you have more than 2 humps, it's trimodal. However, as we think about the word mode, mode is the one that appears the most. So it is the highest point. But you can have regional modes. So this is a mode, and that's a mode. That is the mode, but this is a regional mode as well. So this is bimodal. Now be careful, because when you're talking about modes, you also don't want to sit there and get too in depth with it, because if you've got something that looks like that, this is really not bimodal. There has to be a significant drop and a significant rise for it to be bimodal. That's really just a unimodal distribution. It's not something that's going to be really that much of a challenge. Like, oh, well, you know what? My interpretation of this is that this is a bimodal distribution with a slight decrease here at the x point 4th place. No. You know what? Just don't get that detailed about it. We're going to talk about, if it's bimodal, it'll look bimodal. Or it won't if we can't change the slide here. Hey, look, it's bimodal. It's distinctly bimodal. However, uniform. If it's rectangular, because all the bars are generally the same height, it's going to be called uniform, because they are uniform in height. Okay. If it is unimodal, then we're going to talk about it differently. We're not going to use the word unimodal. We're going to talk about it differently. We're going to either say that it is symmetric or something else. And by symmetric, we mean that this shape will basically fold on itself because it has a line of symmetry. But it's not necessarily going to be exact. It'll be relatively symmetric. If you look at this graph right here, it is unimodal. It looks relatively the same on both sides, but if you fold it over, it's not exact. It's close enough. It's relatively symmetric. That's fabulous. If it's not symmetric, then it is skewed. And it is either skewed to the left or skewed to the right. And how do we determine whether it's skewed to the left or skewed to the right? Well, you look at the tail. See the tail right here? This tail's off to the right. And it turns out that the best way to say this is the skew is pulled in the direction of the tail. If it's got a tail, and you can think about it as like, here is your symmetric distribution, and what I'm doing is I'm going to grab it, I'm going to pinch it, and I'm going to pull the tail off to the right, and I get this shape right here, and I get a distribution that is skewed to the right. Tail goes to the right, skewed to the right. Here, we can come over here, we can pinch the distribution, and as we did in class, it's pinch and pull the distribution to the left. We get this tail to the left, skew left. Skew goes in the direction of the tail. All right? And then you have to ask yourself, well, what about things that like stick out? Things that are interesting and make me go, huh, why is that there? For example, if you were looking at the amount of weight that high school football players bench press, you might see a graph that looks like this. Because, you know, you work for the PIAA Athletic Association thing. And you say, oh, here it is. And this makes a lot of sense because, you know, here's all the football players, and they tend to be average. And there's a few people that are really weak on the football team because they kick and they don't work out like everybody else. And they don't. And they shouldn't because it's not their thing. Their thing is that they're going to kick the ball. And then you've got a few people that are really strong. But then you're working for the PIAA and you see this. And you're like, well, why is that there? And your first thought is, what? Yeah, you're thinking steroids. And if you saw this, you would say, why is that group there? And you're not saying that, oh, these people are steroids, but you would question it because it sticks out. It's unique. Now, this group that sticks out here, it's called an outlier. Hence the word outlier. It's an outlier. In the next chapter, we will determine whether or not something actually is an outlier mathematically. For right now, if it sticks out there, it's an outlier. If it's way off the group, it's an outlier. Okay? Take a look at this graph right here. Here we have an outlier. We've got these people per housing unit, and we got an average per housing unit, meaning house, apartment, trailer, whatever you live in. And 3 people per housing unit, up to 375, up to probably about 4.25 people per housing unit. And then down here, you've got this group of 3 that is really smaller. And this is for a city. So each one of these is a city. So there's 2 cities right there at about an average per 3. And these groups are down here, and they're an outlier. And you say, well, why are these groups down here? And the answer that we've discovered, or at least we think what it is that maybe these cities come from the south. And if they're in the south, maybe those southern cities have a large population of senior citizens. And those senior citizens don't have families living with them. So there's less people per housing unit there. Whereas these are not those southern cities with large elderly populations. So maybe actually what we have here, this is true information, but maybe we actually don't want this to be part of this data set because it doesn't belong there. Maybe this is actually just your average city and these are like retirement cities, if there's such a thing as retirement city. So maybe we don't want this to actually be part of it. Okay? So, where's the center of a distribution? Shape, center, and spread. Center on a symmetric distribution, it's right there where you think it's going to be. It's the center of the distribution. So, if I have, it's right there. That's the fold point. However, if I have a skewed distribution, one that looks like this, the center isn't necessarily going to be the peak. For our purposes right now, if you're guessing a region somewhere like that, good enough. We will find the center specifically next chapter. Right now, where do you think it's going to be? Be reasonable. Don't be dumb. Don't say, oh, it's over here. No. Ah, it's over here. No, be smart, okay? Just a reasonable guess. And it's a guess at this point, and that's fine. Okay? But center is still important. We'll have a big part of center next chapter as well. And finally, what's the spread going to be? Spread for us is going to be the range. And what is the range? The range is the value from the largest to the smallest. So it's that distance right there. Or if you're in my A3 class, range is where the deer and the antelope play. And I really like that answer, but you can't use it on the test. So range is value from distance from largest to smallest place. And we're going to find out more as we talk about that. Okay. When we compare distributions, you have to compare shape, center, and spread. But this is what's really important. Everything that you're doing has to be, let's break out the highlighter here, has to be on the same scale. It makes absolutely no sense for me to talk about people's heights and have one group of people in meters and have one group of people in feet. That makes no sense because the graphs are going to be completely distorted. The scale's going to be wrong. I need to have them be the same scale. If I'm talking about weight, I'm not going to talk about kilograms versus pounds. I want to compare pounds versus pounds. That's really important. Anything else we need to talk about here? Well, probably. Let's see. All right. So, oh, we're coming back.